So I believe we have a quorum.
Yeah, you said-
So it is after 7. Let's open tonight's Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Jean, are you there?
I am here. Matt is
Yay.
supposed to be here.
Well, I do appreciate that more recently, both Jean and Matt have started to direct copy everyone on things coming to me for our meetings.
I have to go
So I
into
think
the door. I'll be right back.
What just happened? Can we switch the whole budget around while she's out? All right.
Carol, you got to point your camera down a little bit. We're just getting the top of your forehead.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Carol. Hi, Carol.
Hi.
But what's wrong with that, Phil? Carol,
Well,
you look great.
Carol is Carol. She's a fine-looking person, and we'd like to see her.
That's inappropriate. That's inappropriate, Phil.
Wait a minute. How is that inappropriate?
When you're my age, you take all the compliments you can get.
Run with that. You were good with that.
I just gave her a great compliment.
There
That's
you
right.
Go. There you go. All right. So in Jean's absence,
I just came back. I have to answer the front door.
we were going to have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, okay. I did pop into the selectmen's meeting. Well, Matt says he's going to call in. So I don't know if you want to take things out of order.
Let's do that. So if everyone's got the agenda, we will skip the update from the town administrator and instead turn to the update from Jean relating to the part of budget discussion. Jean, did you see, I saw the email from Matt mid-afternoon about the state trying to pass, what, a 3-month budget?
For the state. Yeah, I think he was just making the point that we don't have state aid. That's really, I think, what he was trying to get at there. We won't have the cherry sheet numbers. And I did call Joe McKenna's office and they have no idea when they're going to be scheduled to come out.
And I saw your email to that effect. So, Jean, can you explain for me, really for me, and everyone else can benefit from that, where that leaves us at the moment? Are we running now these 1-month budgets?
We are. 15th of the month, we have to send in a request to DOR to deficit spend. Once they approve that, we're allowed to run the following month's budget. So right now we were approved for the August, and it's really based upon the actuals for FY20. So it's not like we can say, hey, we're going to reduce our budget, so we're going to reduce our deficit spend request. We have to put in exactly 1/12 of what we had last year. So
Right.
it's a little crazy. And then you have to live with what you say. So for instance, we didn't plan on paying for the property liability insurance in July because we didn't expect it till August, but that came in earlier than it was expected. So typically if we had our budget, I would just process the invoice, but now we have to wait until we're allowed to pay that bill. So you're babysitting invoicing a little bit. As opposed to, having the full year's budget and being able to pay as the bills come in.
So when we had the last joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, my memory was, particularly the night they voted for the last postponement that got us into September, the 4-to-1 vote was in part based on a concern of the majority voters that they didn't have a lot of the financial information they felt would be necessary in order to properly be able to, lay out a budget for vote in a warrant. At this point, Jean, you're suggesting that even in late July, there's no confidence that we'll have the cherry sheet numbers in any time frame that'll make it useful for publication prior to a September 12 meeting, correct?
That's correct.
And there's no sense.
There's no better information than we had back in June.
Nor is there any sense we'll have it in the next couple of weeks, right?
That's correct.
And have you got any sense, has anyone heard anything to suggest Board of Selectmen will, because of that, consider moving town meeting again?
I would hope not. I would strongly, that would be bad, Howard.
Yep. So is it fair to say at the moment, we appear headed for a September 12th town meeting?
I'll let Maddie answer the question, but I'm really hoping that's what's happening.
Okay. And I understand that Matt's not on yet, but that's your perception at the moment, correct?
That is my, yes.
Okay. So backtracking from there, where does that leave us and even Board of Selectmen and you, your office, for what we would propose to the town on September 12th?
Again, I'm going to let Maddie answer the question. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we have to vote a budget on September 12th. You have to fix the elected salaries. And we have to at least vote the enterprise funds and the cable receipts reserve and BBT. I have other articles going on. I would still look, and my recommendation would be is to put some revenue budget in there and then, you know, have our November town meeting as scheduled. And we would adjust any budgets accordingly then, so we can set the tax rate at the beginning of December.
Well, we've seen this now consistently for a while, that whatever finance look to do still might run up against what Board of Selectmen and the town administrator would be pitching or proposing. Gene, we don't have that information at the moment, correct?
Again, I'm going to question.
Gene, I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm going to let Matt address that when he logs on.
Let's try it a different way. You don't have that yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I'm not in this format and under these circumstances inclined, guys, unless other people want to, I'm not inclined for finance to try to take the time and bring in groups in front of finance in the next couple of weeks for us to try to cobble together what we would propose to the town, independent of what Board of Selectmen and town administrator would for the budget. What are folks' thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I don't know. Hey, one thing I wondered, Howard, or anybody, is if we socially distance, can we actually meet in person in the big room or not?
I think the town hall's still fully closed, isn't it?
No, you could, like the board's meeting there tonight. I think they're restricting it to 10 people, which would be okay for you. The question is, when would you meet? Because the board is meeting on a weekly basis now. So you would have to go off the, you know, alternate the board schedule.
So Dick, I appreciate your comment. I agree with you. I'm going to say 4 weeks ago or so, I did attend the joint meeting when the Board of Selectmen was physically there. And I kept my distance, but it was a substantially different event, Dick, you're right. To just be able to, again, be there in person. And even for this group, right? Everybody probably feels the same way. With all respect to Lynn's comment that she's Zooming all the time, I'm not a Zoomer. I'd prefer to meet in person, but to Gene's point, already at the end of July, we're running short on time for what we're asked to roll out for September 12th. And I'm not sure. So Dick, the short answer to your question is, I'm okay with that. And I think, Gene, correct, the town is okay with that, so long as we picked the night where the space was available.
Yeah, we can check with the town clerk as to limitations, but I think you can have at least 10 people in the meeting room. because they socially distance with, I mean, you wouldn't be all around the table. You're spaced out in the room itself.
I have another question, Howard. So this is for you, Gene. So when it comes to procedure, you know, when in the pre-COVID days, we would have all the department heads come and support their budget, and we'd have discussion and so on and so forth. Now, we've not been able to do that with everybody because in our current situation. Is there anything in the town bylaws or the state regulations that says if you don't go through that process, that somehow it's null and void, or can we just recommend budgets without meeting with department heads? Or, I mean, are you?
Actually, I think you've met with most of the larger departments. We were pretty fast through the budget process. I mean, COVID hit probably around March. Well, I know for us, it was March 14th. I believe we didn't, and you met with the school once before. We were looking to bring in, did you meet? I don't know if you met with BBT. I think you haven't.
We did meet with
met with
BBT.
Did you?
Yeah, we met with the school. I think we met with the school either 2 times or even 3.
Yeah,
You met with police, fire, highway.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you did meet with the bigger departments. We were going to update you on
I
health
think we met
insurance.
with almost every department so far.
Yeah.
haven't we?
What the problem I have, to Dick's point, is my feeling is that all those requests and requirements and what might be available is all changed.
Oh, yes.
And so in order to propose our own budget, Dick, you'd want to meet with some of the major departments again, because you could either make a determination that you had to cut 15% across the board, or 2%, or 18%. And you could feel as though you wanted to make sure that that didn't have a more dramatic increase on a few departments than others. Before I start proposing a budget that cut anyone, I think I'd want to give them a fair opportunity to meet. So Dick, that goes back to that question.
Right.
Would finance, so Gene sent us a timeline. I think, Gene, it went to everybody today. There's an email that went out, Ray, clean town meeting timeline. Oh, from Suzanne, actually. Did everyone see that?
Yes.
Well, I asked her for a clean town meeting timeline because I had mocked mine up. That's why I asked her for that.
Yep.
That's why I requested the information that way.
I would have preferred to see your markup, Gene. I'll bet it had some colorful input handwritten. But so in the timeline, it's got July 28, reopen the warrant, close the warrant on August 4. August 4, Board of Selectmen sign the warrant and prepare postage for FinCom. And then August 18 seems like the timing definitive deadline. Is that fair, Gene?
Correct, because we have to fly back for Suzanne to mail out.
Yeah. So in that scenario, the Board of Selectmen feeds us their proposed budget to be presented within 1 or 2 of the warrants. And we basically say, that's fantastic. That's the best thing we've ever seen. Where do we sign? So this comes back to the age-old question of, does FinCom propose an alternate budget to the town on September 12th? And that goes back to that original question tonight. Do we want to try to reinvent the wheel in the absence of any current direction from Board of Selectmen? Now, to Gene's point, they're meeting every week, but we don't have any of that information. You know.
Howard, I think 1 second.
Sure.
So my understanding is we are an oversight committee, and we are basically overseeing what budgets get put forth, and from time to time records or updates on spending, etc. But in general, if we're not a body to take any action, say, more than oversight, So if there's nothing,
No, I disagree with that.
okay, so clarify for me then.
We're allowed to submit a budget to town meeting. In fact, we're the party that's authorized to submit a budget to town meeting.
Recommended.
Recommend a budget, sure, but the theory is historically, Phil, since I've been on the board 4 or 5 years, we've adopted the budget that Board of Selectmen proposed. That's where Jean's or Suzanne's timeline is. Here's the budget we like. FinCom, look at it. It's wonderful. Please sign off so it can get to the flyer to get to the printer. What you can do, Phil, what a more independent, more engaged, probably, and not to say we're not engaged, but a FinCom can. So when you meet with the different groups, you may find that the Board of Selectmen and or the town administrator say, no, we don't want to fund the new fire truck this year. And FinCom pitches a budget that says to the town, we do want to fund the fire truck this year. Not as an independent warrant, but as part of the budget that we're pitching to you. Phil, invariably, they've come together, right? In April, by April, you're eating, you meet with everybody, you have all these fascinating questions for them, get all this information, and then we get pitched the Board of Selectmen budget, and that's the one we end up putting into the flyer. So I think that with a usual year, we've got enough knowledge as a group to say, hey, here are 2 or 3 different things we'd like to pitch that might be different than what the town's prepared to pitch. This year with COVID, our group, in my opinion, has even less real information to take on that task. It's not to say I'm unwilling for us to try to do it, but I think it's that the lack of information is even more dramatic for FinCom as a volunteer organization than the information that would be going to Matt, the town administrator, who's paid by the town to full-time look into this, and who then invariably meets far more directly with Board of Selectmen than he does with us, right? You could this year or next vote to cut the town administrator's salary, although he's under contract. Next time his contract came up, said, unless you meet with us instead of Board of Selectmen with the information. But we always get information secondhand.
Right.
We get what, in my world, we call it hearsay. You know, and are asked to sign off on it. So Phil, that's the difference between oversight and actually we do have authority to propose our own budget, but would need a lot more information and would need really to schedule a meeting that required Matt to be hours at a time. In my opinion, you'd probably need to spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours really understanding some of the nuances that they're doing week by week by week with Board of Selectmen. And in the end, Phil, you're going to get up on September 12th and have Board of Selectmen, 4 or 5 folks on stage who are elected by the town, say, this is the budget we're pitching to you this year. And then the FinCom get up and say, hey, guess what? We're a bunch of fascinating town folks. Here's the budget we're pitching to you this year and why it's different. And we want you to vote for ours instead of theirs. You could do that.
Has it ever been done in anybody's recollection for the last 10 years, 12 years?
So I will tell you, Phil, I think that 3 or 4 years ago, we had a couple of years where FinCom voted against authorizing the monies for the Blackstone Valley Technical School that they were asking for. And so I think we start, Carol, is that pretty close? We start to separate that piece so that so you could ride through a co-endorsed budget on everything else. Board of Selectmen and FinCon agreed on everything else, but here was the Blackstone Valley Tech budget, and you were being asked by the Board of Selectmen to approve it, and you were being told on the recommendation of the Finance Committee to vote against it. And I think once or twice we had a negative recommendation on it. And I think once we might, no, I think each time, well, we got our negative recommendation. You know, I think once we did get the town to vote against it. I think we were 12 towns in favor, 1 Douglas against, and then under the contract, unless if they get more than 9 out of 13, we had to approve. And so in November, we were basically required or be in breach of contract to then vote to approve it. But Phil, that's an example that I can think of where we separated a line item.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great information because I was under the impression we were mostly, if not all, oversight. So yeah, good stuff.
We have authority, but it doesn't have any teeth in it. How's that?
Yeah, it's like a shark with a pair of guns.
And it's the best example is the night we would have voted for the June town meeting. And we made all our pitches for it after meeting with Gene. And, you know, ultimately it became a complete vote of Board of Selectmen, right?
Right.
So that goes back to the question of whether we want to do that work and try to pitch our own budget. Or, and Dick, that goes to your point of would we re-meet with some of the groups? Now, we might want to meet with school committee once more. If there were ever a line item, now school committee's, what, 70% of the budget anyway. But if there were ever a group that we'd look to maybe pitch to the town a different proposal than might be coming out from Board of Selectmen, it'd probably be on the school or schools. New superintendent coming in or in, not sure what Board of Selectmen is planning to do vis-a-vis COVID with funding for the schools. To be honest, I don't know what schools currently are doing with reopening and what that plan is.
So Howard, so my question was simply when it comes to procedure, if for some reason we weren't able to meet with one of the town boards or committees because of COVID, does that affect the legality of anything in the process, or are we still good to go even if we didn't actually meet with somebody?
I think the latter. I think we are still good to go. The desire to meet with the groups is a desire for information, but is not required. I think we're required to have the open meeting. Correct,
So,
Gene?
On the bylaws, it does say that we'll meet with the the individual departments and department heads, and it's required, if I remember correctly.
I think we've met with them all, though.
Yeah, no, well, I agree. And I'm there with that too. I think we're just kind of talking about stuff right now, trying to fill some airtime because we don't really have anything to talk about, right?
Oh, you can all the minutes.
No, they're fair questions. It's still a conundrum of what FinCom wants to do based on a September 12th town meeting. No change, Gene, from when Board of Selectmen continued the town meeting because they didn't have information, financial information. There's been no new information provided to date, correct, from the state?
Not required. No.
Yeah.
And to answer your previous question, you do have to hold a public hearing. That is not on Suzanne's time frame because she has the Board of Selectmen's checklist. But a public hearing has to be held.
Right. Yep.
Gene, do you know when that's required to be backed out from when we sign the, would sign off on the flyer.
Well, I would have to be prior to August 18th and enough time where you would have time to write your recommendations. Now, the other thing is, back to Phil's question about departments, you can choose to bring in departments for the fall town meeting. If you choose to adopt whatever the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator present now, and you have other questions and how it impacts departments, we can call them in preparation for the fall town meeting.
When you say fall town meeting, you mean September or November?
Oh, I'm sorry, November.
Okay. I think I would rather wait to do that until after September 12th.
Right, if you the budget and you felt like you had questions at that point, we can certainly call departments back in preparation for the November town meeting.
Which I would recommend, unless somebody proposes otherwise, we wouldn't do until after, at least for the November town meeting, we wouldn't do until after the September 12th town meeting.
Correct.
The question open to the floor now is, does anyone want to call a department head in before, to Jean's point, I would think we would need to have I think we need to have the public hearing. It looks like August 10th or August 11th.
We typically request all department heads to be present at the public hearing, so you would have opportunity to ask any questions at that point, or to the department heads. I would ask that if you have any specific questions, that we give them some, idea of what they're going to be, so they can properly prepare for that. As you can only imagine, COVID world is very unique here, so I would want to give them some opportunity to prepare for that meeting.
Yeah, that's only fair.
I'm not a fan of dragging in the school board just to educate us on what the schools are doing this fall. I'm sure the school board has their hands completely full right now. But does anyone feel a need to bring them in before August 11 or 10 for real questions about what they're looking for, where they are with their budget, and where we would want to be at the public hearing and then at the warrant a week later?
Do you mean the school board?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know, I know the schools are in such a mess. They don't know what's going on.
So it's a close call of whether we want them parading in front of us for us to have information versus have them busy doing the things they're trying to do to get ready for the fall.
I think, these are trying times, and I think they need all their effort trying to figure out how they're going to even get these kids somewhat educated.
I will say this, at least with our former superintendent and the school board, I did feel like they felt like they had a sympathetic ear in the finance committee. I don't know if they feel like Board of Selectmen and town administrator are trying to block them out, and they may want to be heard on an effort to get someone else to pitch for them.
Does Heather have a sense of what they're thinking since she's on the school board, or is that a conflict just to even ask?
I think Heather left.
She's on vacation, so maybe.
I
Oh, we
did
saw
not
her.
leave. I'm sorry. I was eating my dinner.
Put that beverage down.
So, I'll put my video back on. I think that given it changes daily, what the school gets from the state, the guidelines keep on changing. I know that you did ask request, and I did send that back, but I know that the superintendent is doing tonight a Zoom meeting with all the parents, trying to figure out what 3 models we're going to suggest to the state. So I think if we're gonna have the school board come back to finance committee, I think a formal request needs to go through. But I think whatever the finance committee decides to do, I will abstain from the vote from that part of it because I am part of the school board. We would come back to you guys if that's what you want, but it's a moving target. It changes day by day. Like I said, we just got the new guidelines about changing school opening. We could potentially have an extra 2 weeks for that, for training. I haven't read all of it because I am on vacation. So, but whatever the finance committee wants to do, if they want the school board, again, a formal request, I would say would go through Jean's office over. Correct, Jean?
I think Jean has left the building now.
No, I did not. I'm sorry. I had muted myself because I have feedback from my mic, Pat said. So I would put the request in if you wanted them at the meeting, but at the very least, I would think that I would invite them to the public hearing. And if you had any questions at that time. Heather, you're meeting on Thursday nights?
School board is normally Wednesday, but we've been having different types of like sub meetings going on. I have one tomorrow. I have one next week. So it just depends on what the session is and what committee I'm on.
So I would recommend, but obviously it's a consensus of the group. I would recommend that we only look to have the school committee come in that once as part of the public hearing, and that perhaps we schedule them for 7:30 or 7:45 or even 8, so that we get some of the smaller departments in, ask any updated questions from the spring with everybody, and then have school board a little longer to hear them out at that point. And that way they come to the one time they sort of have to or really should, and not twice. We can maybe cover a lot of ground with our departments at the public hearing.
Yeah, I think so too. I have one question, and I may have missed it because I somehow managed to miss 2 of the meetings, but I noticed that they were cutting quite a bit out of community development, and I was just curious, do we have any details on exactly what they're doing there?
Matt's iPhone just showed up, Howard. I don't know if you realize that, so you can start directing your question. I don't know if we can hear him.
Well, let's address Carol's question first. Does anyone, including Matt, have any information about what the nature of the cuts with community development have been?
If I may,
Caroline.
Mr. Chairman.
Hello, Matthew.
Can you hear me? I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yes.
Just by way of explanation, I'm in my car on my way to watch my kids play baseball for the first time in more than a year. So that's the noise. The Board of Selectmen gave me a target to try to reach within the Community Development Department to help arrive at a general savings number, which would put us on a path to balance a budget in anticipation of significant revenue reductions from the state. I believe the number for community development, and it was in the $51,000, $52,000 range. Maybe it was more like 56, but it was over 50 and less than 60. And my initial plans were to eliminate a position to reduce another one by 50%, and then backfill the workload with electronic permitting software, and then we would train somebody, probably add some hours to another staff or to handle it all.
So
with
what
the passage, hold on, that's just the general, that was what was.
Mhm.
Where we are now is different.
Okay,
So with respect to funding the salary of the Concom agent, we're going to take, we had $0 planned to be taken from the Wetlands Conservation Fund. We are now going to take 20,000 out of that revenue and apply it to the general fund budget to support that salary.
okay,
So that's 20,000 of the 50 some odd.
yep,
The other position we are in discussions with, I don't like to disclose, personal decision-making factors, but I believe that we are in a healthy pattern to retain the employee part-time instead of full-time, and the employee may retire. And what that will do
Okay.
is it'll shift the costs around. And so that way we keep that person's, half of that person's hours,
mhm,
but the financial burden, a lot of the financial burden will shift to the retirement fund. That's going to get me pretty close to the target. And at that point, I'll either sharpen my pencil a little bit more and try to extract a little bit more out of the department, or I'll just leave it. The e-permitting, by the time we get it online, I'm not going to score a 12-month expense to it, because really by the time it's rolled out, it's going to be more of a 6-month expense.
yeah,
Because I won't be able to purchase it until halfway into the year. Might come short of the time, but we got real savings out of the situation, and if I have to find it somewhere else or just load it up with, add it to the load on free cash for that 1 year, I'll just do that. I'll recommend that, because I think this is the least disruptive way forward, and that leaves the department with enough person hours to continue to meet the work burden.
okay. Okay,
Okay, so Matthew, you just said that you were getting ready to propose a budget that reflected a significant revenue reduction from the state. Could you expound on that, please?
Sure. So, in the past, when the economy went into recession, the Commonwealth passed some of its revenue stress onto the municipalities. You may remember that unrestricted general government assistance was reduced significantly, and they made a cut to Chapter 70. It wasn't a large percentage, but because it's a small percentage of a large number, it was still a lot of money for the town. And I looked at those historic figures, and using various economic benchmarks as my best estimate of what the revenue impact would be from this crisis, I took the real estate recession and I doubled the numbers. So in other words, instead of a 25% reduction in unrestricted government assistance, I factored in a 50% reduction, and I factored in a 4% reduction in Chapter 70 instead of a 2%. So I doubled what happened in the most recent recession, because I think unemployment and economic activity in general reflect an economic downturn that's about 2 times as severe as our last bad recession. With that being the case, I believe, now again, I'm driving, but I think we came up about $920,000 of revenue being removed from our revenue projection. And that approach generally jives with the approach being taken by other towns that are as heavily dependent as we are on state aid. Everybody's marching to a different drummer right now in terms of when they have town meeting and how much they factor in. But this to me was the most responsible way forward. So we were going to do all the cuts that the Board of Selectmen approved in order to bring the spending back down to reflect the actual revenue base of the town. And then we identified, even after all those cuts, we identified that we would probably have to use as much as 400,000 or slightly more than that of free cash to balance the budget. So in other words, I made about $500,000 worth of spending reductions, and then frankly, it's raining, so I recommended we use the rainy day fund for that gap. Is that enough detail, Mr. Chairman, or is there more that?
That is not enough detail.
You are
Yeah,
so predictable.
I would definitely concur with that. 'Cause I'm like not only partly cloudy, I'm real cloudy right now. I have no idea what's.
So as some folks may know, my daughter is planning to enroll this fall in the same program of political speak that Matthew graduated from. So I'm accustomed at my home to hearing the type of answer that Matt just gave us. Matthew, with regard to the 520,000, where are those cuts coming from?
All right, so instead of giving the schools a 2% increase, they would get a 1% increase year over year. Secondly, we would leave an anticipated retirement in the police department. We would leave the position vacant for 6 months. We would do a across-the-board 2.5% reduction to all department expenditure accounts. Or should I say expense accounts. So expenses are not personnel. So the things they buy, not the people they pay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there was a aforementioned or discussed reductions to community development. And Gene, I think those are most of them. I had this conversation so long ago now, I'm a little bit, how could I forget? So no COLA. So the unions have agreed, all of the unions, the teachers, police, and fire have agreed to take 0% COLA for fiscal 21. And I think those are the major components of how we get to $500,000.
So let's break down the 2% to 1% a little further. What does that do with workforce at the school department?
I think you have to ask the school committee what their final result is going to be.
Okay.
I believe they'll have to reduce a couple of positions to get to 1%. Bear in mind that some of their reserves, at least the last time I checked, some of their reserves are pretty healthy, so they might be able to hold the line.
Okay. Okay. Have they signed off at least verbally on your 2% down to 1%?
My understanding is they thought I was going to ask for a 0, so they kind of made a bunch of plans around a 0.
Yeah.
And were relatively, I don't want to say happy, that's not a good word, but they were relieved perhaps that we'll try to hold them at 1%. They're not the issue right now in terms of expenses going up. BVT is the issue, and property and casualty insurance is the issue. And I don't know that I can do anything about either one of those things. So we had to find those reductions.
Can you tell us about the BVT component of that?
I can only tell you that the increase that they requested, they're holding the line on that. They're not going to change their tune. Just as a point of fact, the leadership of BVT asked for the town to allocate some of our CARES funding, some of our COVID response money to them to help them with whatever it was they think they needed for. And the answer was no, we're not doing that.
I think the answer was even a little more colorful than that, Matthew.
I went to school to be a diplomat, as you just pointed out.
So I think that's accurate. I'm not sure if everybody in finance saw that exchange, but BVT asked for money from us for CARES or from the CARES money, and the Board of Selectmen very succinctly told them no. There were a couple of exchanges, but it was left at that.
Were there any towns that did allocate money from the CARES, or did they just ask for us?
I believe, well, I know that Upton gave them $25,000. I think you're between a rock and a hard place when you're the host community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know that anybody else did, and I don't want to speculate. I know that others were approached, but I'm pretty sure the only one I can confirm is Upton.
How many towns at this point have had their town meetings? Do we know that answer?
Gene tried to find out and didn't get a lot of responses.
Oh, well, that was the email that I sent later in the day. I received 3 out of the 10, and I know others held their town meeting, but I was looking for a little more information as well. But I'm still going to reach out to them. I'll hopefully be able to have a more extensive list for you next meeting.
So I think that to maybe Lynn's question and the issue this board has had for quite a few years is, you know, as we head toward, again, what we talked about with Phil, right, before Matt got on tonight, the concept of as we head to town meeting and we've got a separate line item in the warrants for approval of BVT's budget request, this board will have an opportunity, Phil, to vote as to whether we would accept their budget request unchanged despite COVID, or vote to recommend that the town deny the request. And the idea again is, my understanding is 9 towns, if 9 towns agree to the request at their town meetings, then no matter what the other 4 do at their town meetings, the whip will come around and require the other 4 to join in. That said, Phil, that doesn't mean we can't be a town, one of the towns that might vote to reject BVT's request. And to that extent, Matt, we've had this discussion now for a few years too. What's the best way for us to find out what the other, I suspect Gene's survey is going to fill in that 9, 10, 11 of the towns have already had town meetings. And so the result of the BVT vote might already, Phil, might already be done. 9 towns may have already approved it unchanged from COVID. Right. Matt, any idea what the best way to find that information out is?
Oh, we'll just push that survey a little harder tomorrow. The members of the BVT catchment area are, you know, all Blackstone Valley town managers that I communicate with on a regular basis, so I can just get back to them. I know that I believe the couple of towns that are the closest to us but are not BVT towns that have not had town meeting. Shrewsbury has not. Oh gosh. And there was another one that was over more towards the east.
That's okay.
But I think most people have tried to do it. But as you know, because I sent this information around this afternoon, as of today, the state has no intention of doing a budget until October 31st, Halloween, interestingly enough. So they're not in a position to guide us. And since we're so heavily dependent on their aid, we've done the best we can to protect our town from the shock of having to do a mid-year cut.
Matthew, could you get me or committee the following information in the next week to 10 days, if you can. One, what the difference is in our cost between BVT's request and a BVT approval at the same 1% we're approving our town school budget.
Oh,
My
God,
memory was,
okay.
well, my memory was they were coming in at something like 5.3 this year.
Oh, no, that's just their assessment. That's their baseline budget. Their impact on what they're going to charge the town for the students as well as their overhead is more
No,
like
no,
12,
no,
13.
No, look, the issue of who's going is a much more difficult issue to address in this
All right,
scenario.
well, I think their assessment, I think it's, Gene, that I'm at a huge disadvantage being in the car. I have no records in front of me. But my memory is that it was 4.3, but there was an additional assessment that may have been 0.7 or 0.8 on top of that. A special assessment or whatever he's calling it that took it just to about 5.
So Matt, do you understand what my question is?
Yes, they do.
What my question is, can someone get us a number of what the cost would be, same number of students, at a 4.3 plus 0.7 assessment increase, year-over-year increase, not students, but, percentage, right? Isn't that the way we're talking? Versus the 1% we're about to allocate for the schools.
You have the handout from Dr. Fitzpatrick, and on A2, it gives the summary sheet, and it includes the total expenditures reflected increase of 3.9% for FY21. And what Matt's alluding to is there's an additional assessment. So their total FY21 assessment was $15,744,963. Of that, they were included in that is an additional assessment of $1,045,617. So there's a minimum contribution, there's transportation, there's debt, and then they add on an additional assessment to get to the total FY21 assessment. And I agree with you. I think most communities here have already voted their FY21 budget. So I don't know if we'll get any traction reducing that additional assessment as we have done in the past, the town of Douglas. But again, if you look at A2, you will be able to see where their costs are by community as well as their total assessment.
So that's a no.
A no for.
You won't get me that information. You're going to make
no.
me
I'm
figure
just
it out
saying,
myself.
No, I will be happy. Well, Matt can answer. I will be happy to send this to you so you don't have to dig it out.
Gene, do you understand what my question is? In other words, if we were approving 1% year over year for BVT's increase versus what they were asking, what would be the difference of the impact on our budget this year? Is it 22,000 or is it 88,000?
Well, we'd have to look at years and look at the 1% increase and check to see whether or not the number of students for the town of Douglas stayed the same. To be able to look at the total assessment and prorate it based on the number of students.
You know what, I'll tell you what, maybe I'm not clear enough. I'll take a look at it based on your reference and see if I can back it out and figure it out.
Let me provide some schedules for you or some backup documentation, and then we can.
I would appreciate that.
Tomorrow.
Okay, you and I can talk about it back and forth. So that would leave us, is that August at the open meeting, open hearing, that we start to have a vote at the end of it, the public hearing? And so at the end of the public hearing, we could vote on whether we want to recommend approval or not approval. With all respect to the idea that 9 towns may have already approved it, you folks know I don't believe in then nonetheless, therefore rubber stamping it because it'll make no difference. I think it's an important signal to the other 12 towns, as well as an important signal to BVT if we think they're overreaching, particularly in a crisis across the communities. So Matt, that was one of the issues, the 520 in spending cost. Jean, can you address the 400 in free cash? Have you got a comfort level in using that amount of Matt's referenced rainy day fund?
I agree with the onset, because I think in light of the fact that we won't have state aid, and the other piece, not knowing how or when we will come out of this new COVID world, I think it's better to use free cash to stabilize the budget system instead of making drastic cuts. I think the town has great strides in sustaining services and departments, and I would hate to see that. I would hate to react to that with the COVID world, and let it settle down, see how we come out on the other side, and then make some tougher decisions.
So Jean, I have 2 questions then to forward to school committee for their appearance at the public hearing. One would be, what is the effect? What is the dollar effect of their cut? And Matt or you may have that number anyway. Their cut from what had been planned to 1%. In other words, of that 520 that Matt's referenced in spending cuts, how much of that is the spending cut to the school? And then of that, how much does the school feel it's able to replace internally from its own savings accounts?
Did you decide on a date for the public hearing?
Well, so if we can, let's address that now. Typically, we've had them on Monday nights for freedom of space in the. Is the public hearing, Jean, something that likely will be in the town hall?
I think at the very least, Matt, how many are we allowed in the resource room now?
I think we can go up to 50% of the room's rated occupancy, provided social distancing is possible.
So I'm going to be a little difficult here. I would like to have, to the extent folks in our group want to physically be present, I think I would physically be present. I would ask that each board, Jean, come in one at a time. If people want to stand in the parking lot and wait, or however that wants to work out, I would prefer not to have everyone in the meeting, in the room at the same time. Is that something we could have?
What do you feel if they were to Zoom in or remote in instead of?
That would be more than acceptable. That
Okay.
I would be okay. How are other folks with that?
I'm okay with that.
Good.
I'm fine with it as long as we get some concrete numbers. It doesn't matter to me whether they're online or in person.
Whatever they're comfortable with.
Yeah. And the same for attendance for our group.
I think that may be beneficial only because it allows the different departments to hear what the other departments have to say and how the impacts are. I think,
That's fine. I understand.
yeah.
I just like to sequester my witnesses. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? So why don't we plan, can we do Monday, August 10?
Okay.
Could most of the group make that? We have so many things to do this summer.
At 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock?
No, that's a question.
Yes, yes.
And Howard will meet in the town hall if we can.
Yeah, Dick, I think the plan at this point is to meet in the town hall. Yes, for those that are comfortable. Yep. Look, you guys know the deal, 6 feet, masks strictly adhered to. Okay. So are there other questions from the board with regard to either Matt or Jean's information?
So we're gonna have to coordinate using a VIA, I guess, because the conservation committee is meeting that night on Zoom.
No, that's not good.
Yes. Matt, is
We
that,
would use a VIA in that room anyway.
okay,
We'll just ask the other guys to go to the smaller room.
okay.
But if does that mean we have to do something besides Zoom? I've just figured out Zoom. I don't think I can figure out anything else.
Well, Howard has
There-
requested that you attend the meeting in person.
But yeah,
No,
that's right.
Not a chance. Carol, if you can't figure it out, I can't figure it out. We'll need everyone else to make the quorum.
All right.
So, yeah, Carol, we'll get that information to everyone. And again, optional whether you come in person or come via Zoom.
But I'm thinking of some of the other people that might want to you know, some of the other committees. They're probably no better at this than the rest of us.
I
Zoom
assume
might
there's-
be all they know.
I assume they're starting to get used to it, but I think we are Zoom based, correct? Or is this obvious something completely different?
This is Zoom.
Right, but didn't she just say we couldn't Zoom because the Conservation Commission was gonna be Zooming the same night?
I don't think so.
Is that what,
No,
that's
that's
not
what
what,
I heard her say. But the resource room is the room you need to use. It's big enough for your purposes, and that
Yep.
room is mostly set up for a VIA. So the cameras, the computer that operates the camera and the phone lines is all right there on the table. So, you know, we've made some strides with that particular suite. That suite we're using for our emergency operations center. We've eliminated some of the workarounds that we threw into place because we were in the middle of a pandemic, and now we're on more of a standard business operation with them. So I will, over the next day or two, be playing with it to see if I can be the host of a meeting. I can put up to 500 people on my account. So I'm hoping that we get a lot of the awkwardness out of it, and all I'd be doing is sending you a link. The same way you would click on the link in an email for a Zoom meeting, you would click on a meeting for a VIA. So I
Okay.
think we're getting there, but we'll
I
experiment with it
apologize.
well before you have to meet.
I apologize, Carol. I stand corrected.
okay.
Yeah. Same issue, right? You and I figuring out what that all means.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it sounds like I have Amanda. I'll have Amanda call you.
It took me an hour and a half to figure out how to do this on my phone, so.
I get it. So how about that? August 10, live or via Zoom or Avia,
Okay.
7 o'clock, Jean, for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we gotta make sure that gets posted.
Oh, we've gotten so good at getting these posted.
Oh, good.
Jean drafts it and I send it to Chris. I'm excellent at that now, aren't I, Jean?
You are right, yes.
Frankly, Amanda sends it. All right, so seriously, any other questions though from anybody for Matt or Jean on where we currently stand?
Yes, Howard. I would say that at this point in time, I am at the point where I don't know how much we have in the checkbook. I don't know how much money's coming in. I don't know how much is going out. And we keep talking about a few, $20,000 or $30,000, but we're talking about budget shortfalls in the range of, 30% to 50% from the state and feds. So it just seems like we're talking about a small number of cuts for a catastrophic reduction in income. So I'm hoping that we're going to be providing some details on the adjustments, in the future. And then the
Well,
only
well,
other thing, the only other thing is that I was a little disappointed in the you know, trying to come up with you know, how many towns have held meetings and what they've done, etc. I think we only get responses from 2 or 3 towns, so I'm a little bit concerned. Do we not have good relationships with our other towns, or are they just not calling us because they don't like us? So that I was a little disappointed in that response. So.
Well, Phil, I sent out the initial email on July 9th, and because this is year end, all of my colleagues are busy in these 2 weeks. They're crazy. So I was not surprised they didn't respond, and I just didn't have time to reach back out to them. This is when you're talking June 30 to July 15th, I'm running 2 fiscal years at the same time. We're doing split payrolls. I'm surprised I didn't get any nasty emails back. We do have good relationships with them, and I'll try to get that information filled in for you.
Yeah. The only other comment I would make is like we get a flurry of like 9 emails like 2 hours before the meeting. So, I mean, I know everybody's busy, but it's hard to digest any kind of information, you know, half hour, whatever before a meeting. So it'd be anything anybody could do about sending stuff a couple days in advance would be greatly appreciated.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm getting a little impatient. When the Board of Selectmen approved the budget, my spreadsheet was closed and I forwarded it to everyone. And this was like 6 weeks ago. And nothing has changed. And we're all numbers people. I said it was 900 some odd thousand in revenue reduction. I told you we identified 500,000 in cuts, and it's 400,000 in free cash. It adds up. We are not a bunch of jamooks. We balance the budget with a spreadsheet that is transparent. It's a public document. It's shared with everyone. Now, if you need me to send a refresher, I will. But folks, we got to be ready to rock and roll with this because we're coming down to the wire. And if I'm sending you all the information that you need, and you don't look at it, and then you come onto a public meeting and say, "Oh, I didn't get any of it." I mean, come on. There's a tremendous amount of work went into identifying all the cuts, and I'm the one who has to have a conversation with employees and department heads and doing all the hard work of making it happen, negotiating with the unions to take a zero COLA. I mean, all of these things have been in progress and have been on the record every single week when the Board of Selectmen meets and I present them with their report.
Right. So Matthew, let me stop you there. No one said that we didn't get the information that you had sent in previous meetings. So if in fact our income situation was the same as it was a month or 2 ago when you had submitted that information, then I would say, okay, we seem to be up to date. I'm still trying to understand. We're talking about a reduction in income somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 30%.
No, Phil, no.
Well, that's what I've been hearing. So
That's
someone,
you're misunderstanding things.
You got to familiarize yourself with the revenue budget, because I am referring to specific line items in the revenue budget, not the whole revenue budget. So a 50% reduction in UGA is about a 4% reduction in our overall revenues. It doesn't translate. It's a lot of a small account, and therefore that's what we're making up. The rest of it comes from the levy, comes from the people.
From the tax base, Phil, the town tax base.
No, I totally understand that, and so I guess everything that I've seen, it so far to me doesn't add up. And if you know, maybe I can spend some time with Matthew and he can clarify it with me. I'd be glad to spend that extra time because
Matthew,
I need to feel like I understand what's going on in order to actually approve things. And right now I'm kind of like, oh, okay.
Matthew, I'll take that. I'll have Phil and I address that together. I'll pull your email from about 6 weeks ago, get it back to Phil, and Phil and I can filter out his concerns prior to needing to take up more of your time.
Right.
So just so everybody knows, the spreadsheet has every cost reduction proposal that I made, and you can turn it on or off, and it will show you what happens to the bottom line of the budget.
So Matthew, I think an important part this evening was at the beginning of the evening before you got on the line, we asked Jean if there were any changes. Jean had actually sent us information earlier today indicating there weren't. And so your numbers from 6 weeks ago would have still been the live numbers. I will concede, Matt, that I also asked you tonight for that information on a verbal basis, having not really either fully digested or not really fully remembered the information you provided 6 weeks ago. So if I asked you to outline information tonight verbally, Matthew, for me, that's the way I practically operate. So I appreciate your ability to walk us through that. To the extent we had that information earlier, I'll try to do a better job of refreshing everyone's memory on that prior to a meeting.
Yeah, but to answer the question, because I'm in a tough spot, because normally this time of year we would have a budget in, the non-COVID world, right? We would have passed a budget in May, and to the extent that I need to make requests of town meeting to move money, to make transfers or other changes, we would have November special town meeting to do that. At this point, we're approaching, we'll be coming into September, and we won't have had that grounding, that basis from which to operate. And so I do need to make a few changes to the numbers that the Board of Selectmen reviewed and approved. And I'm reacting to things in real time that are challenging at best. So as we go along, one of the things I've had to do is allocate funds for the appraisal of real property that's owned by the town, that the town is going to seek to dispose of for one-time revenues. The appraisal is, market rate, $4,000, for $4,400 every time we do a restricted appraisal on a piece of real property. I need 2 appraisals done in this year's budget. So 8,800 will be added to the Board of Selectmen's budget. I also have to add the cost of doing percolation tests and other filings associated with town-owned property on Walham Lake Road that is going to be sold at tax sale at auction. Again, we're trying to increase their value by selling buildable lots instead of presenting it as raw land that we don't know anything about. So there's another $1,850 that needs to be added to the selectmen's budget. So what am I up to? $10,650. Then from there, the one unsolved or unresolved issue is as follows. You will recall that when the fire chief presented to you back pre-COVID, when was that? I mean, November, December, when the chief was in front of you?
December,
and he mentioned his ongoing issues resourcing his equipment, making sure he can staff an ambulance at all times, and taking into consideration the fact that it's getting harder and harder to recruit call firefighters and call EMTs. The chief and I are talking about a potential reorganization of his department because we've had several departures in the last couple weeks. to other departments. And so we have this opportunity to look at how he's configured and try to fund that reorganization. We do have revenue source in the ambulance fund, the restricted receipts account for ambulance, that we might recommend tapping into to support that reorganization. But the goal is to be ready for the potential public health issues that we have coming up this fall. Right now, we are not in the strongest position to respond to a resurgence of the pandemic, and that is an uncomfortable place to be. And the only thing we can do is do something about it. And if we have insight into how we want to be staffed and what skill sets we need to go get that, even if it's a little bit more expensive than what we had. So that's the most I can tell you right now, because we are recruiting people and we're doing interviews and postings are going up. I hope to have all that sharpened up and put into any budget alteration that I make. So when I send you, the spreadsheet is still, except for the 10,650 and whatever additional I'm going to need for the fire department, those would be the only changes to the budget as I presented it, and it was voted by the Board of Selectmen however many weeks ago.
Fantastic. I appreciate that information. Thank you, Matt. That's a little clarification. Is that, Matt, is that then final, or you still have those tweaks with the fire department part of it?
I want that to be final so that FinCom can have a budget that's balanced. I'm giving you a balanced budget, and you can tweak it as you see fit. But I don't want this to languish to November, because by then, frankly, for the COVID response, it'll be too late. So I got to get this buttoned up in the next couple of weeks. Some of what I have to do, I have to work out with Labor Council, and I've been working on it pretty hard all day today, but it takes time.
Anyone else? Okay. So on the agenda, we've got the concept. Jean, do you want us to approve a couple of sets of minutes tonight?
I would love that.
All right. So in one of the emails from Jean earlier this afternoon, it included 2 sets of minutes. If everyone's got those available. Right, so we've got minutes for the Tuesday, June 30th meeting.
Motion to approve, Howard.
Thank you, Dick. That's recognized. Any second?
Second.
Lynn, thank you. That's recognized. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Howard, I
then
want to abstain
Okay, Phil, thank you.
on the meeting minutes. I just didn't have enough time to go through them yet.
Okay, Phil, your abstention is noted. And so let's go to the minutes, not many, for Tuesday, July 14th. Oh, that was a pretty straightforward meeting.
Motion to approve.
Dick, that's recognized. A second? I'm sorry?
Second. It's Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. Yep, thank you, Sandy. That's recognized. All those in favor on the meeting minutes for Tuesday, July 14th? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
I have to abstain again, to Howard. I'm
This time-
actually driving right now, so but unfortunately
Well-
I can't read.
Well, this time you're abstaining, Phil, because you were not present at that meeting, correct?
Well, if that's what it says, yes, that's fine. Like I said,
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to read them yet.
Right. Okay. Any other old or new business?
So just want to double check that we're meeting on that Monday, August, whatever that was.
August 10th.
August 10th, and so that's Dick for the
Public hearing.
public hearing.
Right, okay.
I don't see a need for a meeting before that. Jean, do you anticipate that you would need us to meet before that at the moment?
I don't wanted to have a meeting to go over any questions that you're going to have in advance of the public hearing. If you wanted to have time to review the budget and, send questions to me if you have any specific questions for the departments.
Matt, do you anticipate sending us a revision budget in the next week to 10 days?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Before the weekend.
Well, so the only opportunity, Dick, everyone theoretically would be next Tuesday. I think that lines up as August 4 to review that budget proposal and, pitch any questions through Jean to the boards prior to the public hearing. I'm okay with us doing that if folks are comfortable doing it. That meeting can last 20 minutes or 3 hours, depending on need.
You're talking about 7 p.m., Howard?
Next Tuesday, 7 p.m.
I'm going to be gone that night, Howard, so I won't be able to make it.
Okay. What's everyone else's perception on holding a meeting next Tuesday night, provided that Matt's able to get us a proposed final budget between, over the weekend or early, let's say Monday?
As long as everybody really looks at the numbers and doesn't make it a waste of time, that'd be great.
Carol?
Yeah, I'm all right with that.
Sandy?
Yes.
And Heather?
No problem. I can be there.
And that
Okay.
was gonna be Zoom, right? That'll be Zoom.
Boy, I hope so. Carol, I hope so.
Okay.
So let's do that. Matthew, if you can get your budget out, I have no problem if you can send it to everyone, if you don't mind. And Jean, you and I will work on a town meeting or a meeting public notice. And we'll meet then next Tuesday night via Zoom at 7 to both discuss the Board of Selectmen and Town Administrators' proposed budget, as well as to see if we have any proposed questions for any of the boards, the
Committees, boards.
Department heads?
department heads. Thank you, Phil, for the public hearing. And Jean, so Jean and Matt, look, you both have a ton on your plate anyway. If there's an opportunity to get us between now and then a little more info on towns that have had town meetings, and particularly for me, towns that have already approved BVT's request as requested, that would be appreciated, but is not, necessary. If it can be done, great. If not, we'll hold that off to August 10th.
Reach out
Any
to
other questions? Does anyone else want to propose a meeting at Carol's house, maybe Saturday around 2?
Does she have a blender?
I'll bring the blender. The
I
finance
do.
committee budget has money for a blender in it.
She's got a pool and a blender. That's good.
It's got a lake.
I have a lake, a blender, and a full bar.
There you go. I'm telling you, that meeting we may talk about that meeting after this meeting ends.
There you go. Maybe that would help me understand the numbers a little.
Trust me, Phil, it would. It would. Okay. Anyone with any other useful motions at 8:29 this evening?
Motion to adjourn.
I recognize Sandy. Sandy's face pops up, big smile, ready to move to adjourn. Any seconds? Good job, Sandy.
A second.
I got Lynn there first, Phil. You got to be quicker than that.
That's all right.
All right. All those in favor?
Enjoy the baseball game.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Abstentions, Phil? You're in favor? In favor. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.